all but Mommy's family. Great supportive community, close-knit caring family. We're non-judgy, blanket fuzzy, stigma-free. All but Mommy's family, friends, family, and community. We all but Mommy's family. Teacher sharing is our key. Great big thanks to you all.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Stigma Stompers, NAMI, Erie County, Pennsylvania's one and only podcast. I am one of your hosts, Abby.
And I'm your other host, Janana.
Today we have with us two very special guests, vice chairs from Compton's table. We have Savannah Jakubowski and Christina Salvia. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Can you both just start off by telling us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Yes, I'm Christina Salvia. As you said, I am the co-vice chair of Compton's Table along with Savannah. I've been with the organization for a few years now, since 2022. I work in higher education, in instructional design, and I also teach English classes.
Awesome.
Awesome. I'm Savannah Jakubowski. I am a 10th grade biology teacher, and I also teach agriculture and forensic science. And I am one of the co-vice chairs of Compton's Table. I've been with Compton's Table since November, I think, but it feels like a lifetime. And I am super excited to be here. I love what NAMI does, so I'm excited.
Yeah. For anyone that doesn't know, can you tell us what Compton's Table is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Compton's Table is a local nonprofit started by our founder and executive director and board chair, Dr. Tyler Titus, back in, I believe, 2021. And our mission is really just to empower queer folks in the Erie area through a community health model to give them support and resources that they need to thrive and live their best authentic lives.
It's absolutely beautiful, the program that you guys have. We actually interviewed Tyler Titus last year, I think it was, for our podcast, and it's tremendous work that you guys do. Thank you.
And we're talking about Compton's Table and all things LGBTQ. This episode goes out in June. We're recording, obviously, ahead of time. So happy Pride Month, because by the time this goes up, it will be Pride Month.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy Pride Month.
So do you guys mind, I mean, we hear a lot of individuals who have struggled with their mental health when it comes to, figuring out their identity and things like that. Do you guys mind sharing your personal journeys and how that looked like for you and how it affected maybe your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't mind. I would be happy to share, I should say. So for me personally, I grew up rurally. I grew up in Crawford County in Linesville. It was a town of 2,000 people with 8 churches, right? Oh, wow. And so from a really early age, even though my particular family, my nuclear family, didn't attend church, the religious culture was very much steeped into, baked into everything. Like, as an example, my marching band used to pray before competitions and stuff. So when you grow up rurally and in a small, agricultural community, if you can pass as straight, you do so, if you don't have a lot of signs of visible queerness. Mm-hmm. And so I very much had that straight passing privilege, right? So when I was in middle school, I kind of realized I was maybe a little bit queer, but I shut myself in the closet hardcore because I knew, given some of the other issues in my life, I grew up around domestic violence and alcoholism and abuse, that I was not about to invite more negativity into the life I was already living. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just ensconced myself in straight culture and was like, you know what? Okay, this is what I'm doing. I had boyfriends, and then I also had female friendships that I was like, something is missing from this. So I didn't actually come out till I was 24, and I met my wife, and we came out together because she's also from a small rural community. And it definitely impacted my mental health. So I mentioned before some issues with domestic violence. And because of that, I developed CPTSD. And sometimes I think some of my CPTSD symptoms and not being quite clear on my own queerness really like kept me in the closet, like as a protective measure, right? Until I could get out of this small community and even in college. So it definitely, my mental health was not impacted just solely because I was LGBT, because I'm a lesbian. It was impacted because I had to figure out how to survive and make it through like a tough social situation before I could come out and be my authentic self. So I've had a lot of issues with anxiety and obsessive compulsive behaviors that really were my brain trying to keep me safe, but there was this like other part to my identity that needed to be explored. So that was my experience a little bit.
Can you tell, in case anyone doesn't know, tell them what CPTSD is?
Oh, yeah. It is complex PTSD. And what it essentially stems from is like a long-term period of heightened like arousal. Like essentially you are living in fight, flight, fawn, or freeze for a really long time. And eventually your body and your nervous system just become habituated to that, right? Those chemicals, those reactions. And the more that you experience danger, and for me, in my case, it was severe and prolonged child abuse, that your brain adapts the way that you think to it. And so CPTSD, unlike regular PTSD, CPTSD is from like a consistently long experience, where PTSD is a little bit more related to like immediate and individual events. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah. Do you mind sharing your story?
Sure. My experience feels a little mundane, but like Savannah, I didn't, like discover or come to terms with my sexual orientation until later in life. Also, I was like in my late 20s, like maybe 28. But much before that, I sort of became kind of aware that I was, I guess what I want to say is the way that manifested before was just a feeling of otherness from other people my age. Like I knew I didn't, first I didn't feel about boys the way other girls my age did, and then I didn't feel about sex the way other people my age did, and not strictly related to that feeling, but also not totally divorced from it. I started suffering from clinical anxiety and depression in a really significant way when I was a teenager, like 15 or 16. And in sort of a cyclical way, that depression and anxiety kind of fed into that feeling of otherness. Like I just always felt a little bit wrong. And so my specific label that I identify with is asexual, which I didn't even know that existed until I was in my mid-20s. And I did that research on my own and sort of discovering that identity is a real and valid and lived identity for others, healed a little bit of that feeling of wrongness, at least as it relates to, my sexuality. So, and like Savannah, I was raised in Erie and in a very sort of socially moderate or socially left-leaning, if anything, family. So I didn't have, a great fear of being ostracized from my nuclear family unit, but also having the privilege of being straight passing, it just wasn't that like wrongness that I felt is not something that I explored until I was an adult. But, eventually doing that and like owning that part of yourself, while I'm not saying that it is completely fixed my anxiety and depression, it definitely helps you to feel, or has helped me to feel more right in my own body and my own identity.
Thank you both so much for sharing that, because I know sometimes it's not easy. That's the whole point of our podcast.
Yeah.
There's still stigma associated, even in the LGBTQ
Absolutely.
Community, but also in mental health in general. So, both of you joining us today and being so willing to share your experiences, we truly do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The only way that you can break stigma down is just talking about it, normalizing it, bringing to light some of the stuff that might feel embarrassing or intrusive, and just being like, yeah, this is me.
Yeah.
Shame likes the shadows,
Yes.
So like speaking openly about things that shouldn't be shameful, but
Right.
sometimes feel like they are,
Yeah.
bringing them out into the light takes the power of that shame away.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of going into that a bit more with talking about mental health and the community itself. What do you think are some of the most common mental health challenges faced by LGBTQ plus individuals that you've observed either at work or personal experience?
Well, decades of research and experience with Compton's Table have shown us that one major issue, particularly among LGBTQ plus youth, is just an increased tendency toward suicidality.
Yes.
Queer young people and gender expansive young people are exponentially more likely to not only consider but also attempt suicide. And that's that fact, and the fact that and the existence of factors of resiliency, that's the reason Compton's Table exists.
Yeah. Community helps buffer
Yeah.
some of the challenges that people face. If you you spoke so perfectly about that feeling of otherness. People identify that otherness before they identify their queerness, right?
Absolutely.
And so that feeling of like, oh, I'm different. A lot of kids, because I work in a high school and I run a GSA called a Gay Straight Alliance called the SHS Alliance. A lot of kids experience really intense anxiety and depression around their LGBTQ plus identity, because they're starting to watch their heteronormative peers, do the dating game and do all of the things that go along with being in puberty and growing through that. And they're like, oh, if I do what I want to do and if I live the way that I want to live, the social exclusion that I am going to experience because of my identity is going to put me at risk. And so if you have kids that already have other marginalized identities or are experiencing abuse or trauma, it's this additive factor. And then for a lot of kids, it becomes this really big, painful secret, like a boil right under the surface, right? And so that just festers and festers and festers until they either have to express it or it comes out in self-harm or self-sabotage, or we just see such a wide variety of those behaviors. I would say the number one concern, particularly under the current administration right now, the presidential administration, is heightened anxiety. The kids are very scared, and they feel very abandoned. And so our job as adults and people who advocate for the queer community is to continue providing those spaces and be even more present for them, because they are watching in real time their rights be rolled back across the nation. So part of our edict, our mission at Compton's Table, is literally just to be like, it doesn't have to be that way. There's this whole group of people who care about you and who want you to be your authentic self and not have to live in this crippling state of anxiety because you're important the way you are and you're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Do you guys mind sharing a little bit more what Compton's Table exactly does? What programs you guys offer for individuals, and how, if someone is watching, if they want to reach out, where they can go and how they can get in contact?
Absolutely. So Compton's Table, the edict is to provide a community space and mutual aid. And we do this in a really wide variety of ways. So part of the way is through programming. We offer several consistent programs like True North and
Chat and
Chill.
Chill. Yeah.
And we have an open mic for queer musicians. And the True North, I'll go back a little bit. The True North program essentially is for people who are on that burgeoning part of adulthood, right?
Right.
They're just figuring out how to pay taxes, how to find an apartment, how to live with a roommate, how to attend to their own hygiene, be that the hygiene of their house or their physical hygiene. And because so many people in the queer community end up disenfranchised from their families or kicked out, a lot of times they're not coming into adult life with those skills. So what True North does is provide training on those skills and resources, how to take care of yourself as a young queer adult and how to advocate. If that's something that interests listeners, you can find that information on
www.comptonstable.org. There's a tab for True North. We would love it if you would check it out.
Yeah, we are always looking to start new cohorts. We run an open mic the third Thursday of every month. You can register on our site, or you can just show up to play. And the purpose of that is to bring the broader queer community together. And we also welcome allies to come and listen and hang out. Like, we're all one group. And then do you want to talk about Chat and Chill a little bit?
Sure. Chat and Chill is another recurring program. In its current iteration, we have this once a month. It's every third Thursday of the month. Currently, it's an 18-plus gathering, although we have a version for younger folks in the works also. So it's a 2-hour program, 6 to 8 p.m., and we typically have 1 hour of loosely structured content. That's the chat portion. So some examples of the things that we talk about in May, we're going to be discussing and sort of exploring small acts of pride, like everyday pride beyond the parade. The idea that it can feel a little bit exhausting to have to perform like this joyous celebration of pride in June when our rights are being systematically stripped away. But the idea of pride as resistance and how you can express that in small but meaningful ways in your everyday life. So we have an hour of loosely structured discussion and activity, and then an hour of just totally free socialization, just community building. And it's so great to see people who don't know each other form these friendships in this space. So Chat and Chill is every third Thursday of the month. If you're interested in joining, once again, that website is comptonstable.org.
We will be also bringing online. We piloted it a little bit, an event called Stitch and Bitch.
Yes.
And what that is, yeah. So like for those that might not be in the know, maybe you weren't raised in a tiny agricultural community. A Stitch and Bitch is where usually in that kind of community, all of the women get together with it might be quilting, it might be knitting, crochet, whatever, with their projects, and they talk trash. They like gossip. Yeah. Our Stitch and Bitch, we're kind of turning it more into a makerspace.
Yes.
Right? So everybody bring your projects in, we'll talk, we'll chat. It really has more of the vibe of like an art class, right? Where people are working on things disparately, but we're all sitting in community together. And we'll be bringing that online again this summer. So check out our website if you're interested in Stitch and Bitch. We also offer mutual aid to members of the queer community. So that we have Compton's Closet, which is a curated closet that people in the queer community can use for if they need interview outfits or honestly, really most anything. Yeah. And that can be, those kind of resources can be accessed just by contacting us at Compton's. Usually we just end up through word of mouth.
Right.
Or somebody just directly asks. And then we also like help a variety of people get services that they need, even if they're not officially through Compton's Table, just because we're very, very fortunate. We have many members on our board who are highly trained professional educators and social workers and therapists and mental health professionals that help people who would otherwise be disenfranchised from those services kind of reach them. So we do a lot of direct mutual aid that way.
I love that.
That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We also have a lending library. This is my passion project. We also have a lending library, which focuses on works by queer authors and works that tell queer stories, which unfortunately even though our local library system is incredible, it is also beholden to the whims of, certain county representatives. And so
Certain former library
directors. So our lending library is available also to ensure that those stories get into the hands of young people, and not just young people, people who want to read them.
Yeah.
That's just like our slate of recurring programming.
Yeah.
We
do a lot. We do a lot of
Yeah.
one-off programs. Like I'm planning Paint and Sip right now. But pretty much anything we can think of to get people together, based around holidays and big events, but even just we're looking really to provide that third space, right? Where people aren't obligated to spend money, but they can come to build community.
Right.
The idea of third spaces is so important. I mean, for LGBTQ community, but honestly, for like everyone needs a third space. And for years ago, it was like churches were third space.
Right.
But not everyone follows or practices a religion, so we need more community-based third spaces for people to go to that are free, that don't require any commitments.
Absolutely.
They can come and go as
Absolutely.
they please. So I really love that a lot.
Thank you.
And I feel like in every episode, I reiterate the same thing. We've always heard how much support helps individuals with their mental health, and that
Absolutely.
definitely seems like what you guys are doing is building that support system for
Absolutely.
individuals who, might have a tough time or finding friends or things like that.
Yeah.
To feel that support system and like, hey, I really do belong.
Yeah,
I love that.
absolutely. Studies tell us that, like when I think about working with the young people who come through Compton's doors, the studies tell us that, the presence of even like one positive adult mentor in their lives exponentially decreases the likelihood that they'll seriously consider or attempt to take their lives by suicide. And I always think about that every time I interact with young people at Compton's table, and I think like they need, even putting aside like creating fostering a community of their peers, the idea that like they need to be able to see that like a happy, well-adjusted, healthy, successful adult life is possible as a queer person.
Yep.
Because when you're young and you're feeling, like you're not right, or you're feeling anxious or depressed, it doesn't always seem like it's possible, but it really is.
Right. And also we have to contend with, in media that focuses on queer people, and I will say as a side note, I understand why this happens, but so many queer stories focus on the trauma of being queer, the outcomes of the trauma of being queer. Like I joke with my wife all the time that I would just really love like one happy lesbian movie where people are not assaulted or don't die at the end. And my role in my school very much, because I teach at a rural school, I might be, and most of the time am, the first queer adult that that these kids have ever met, right? And I'm just like a normal person going about my normal day-to-day life.
Right.
And that example, I think, takes so much pressure off of kids.
Absolutely.
Because that you hit the nail so perfectly on the head. They just don't. They don't even know what they don't even know. Right. I tell my students where I teach all the time that, come to Compton's table. There is a whole group of people who are ready to be your friend and help you get what you want to get and embrace who you are. And you don't even need to code switch or change at all to receive that support.
Because I feel like my experience, and again, like I said, I came out later in life, but I feel like as you get older and you become more comfortable with your identity as a queer person, it feels more and more like, okay, this is only a part of my identity. It's an important part. It's a part that I hold very dear and which is very important to me, but I am still just a person with many other facets.
Yes. It becomes like the more you spend time around as a kid, like queer adults and for me, like other queer adults, it normalizes it. Absolutely. Like I always say, being a lesbian is like one of the least interesting parts of my personhood.
Right.
Like it's so much more interesting that I like sew my own clothing and that sort of thing. Right.
Yeah.
So I think you hit that perfectly.
Thank you.
I feel like, unfortunately, it's entirely like straight society, like cishet straight society, are so focused on the gender and sexuality of the entire community, but like your husband is the least interesting thing about you. Like you have a whole personality outside of your marriage, so why do you not think that about the LGBTQ community?
Exactly. Like
I don't get
it. It becomes so many times stories about queer people are told where their queerness is the only thing centered about them.
Right.
I'm really excited for a day when we get to a point where we're just telling stories and that character is queer or trans, and it's not even like worth talking about because it's so normalized.
Yeah.
I've received a lot of negative attention at my work because I've had, coworkers say like, well, you're making it your whole personality. No, you're making it my whole personality. Yeah. You can't see past the rainbow to see all the other stuff that I'm doing. And I think that kids really feel the pain of that spotlight, right? Because in a small rural school, if you come out, everybody and their grandma is going to know, and it's going to be talked about. And so many kids, that social anxiety prevents them from living authentically. Like not only the social pressure of it and the negative experiences, but just that, oh my God, I don't want the spotlight on me. I'm not that kind of person.
At an age where having attention on you feels like the last thing on earth you want to invite.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we do at Compton's also is trying to help destigmatize that attention and give that attention in like a healthy way.
Right.
Like it's not like when we do our chat and chills or anything, we're sitting around being like, yes, time to discuss the gayness in the room. Right. You know what I mean? Like instead we're like, what do you like to do? What's your favorite board game? What video game shall we play? Like it totally, having that third space for queer people decenters queerness in a really funny, in a funny way. Yeah. You'd think that it would make it more intense. It doesn't.
Absolutely.
It helps normalize.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but I think a lot of people think that like this community is like new.
Yeah.
But I hate to tell you this. It's not new. So like, why are we so shocked?
Where I grew up, I obviously was very small. All of my friends that I grew up with, none of us were out. Well, one of us was out, but that was because she couldn't pass.
Yeah.
We all came out after high school, and I realized looking back, we were all like, there's something different about you. You're my friend. You know what I mean? And now we all came out of the closet.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, the queer folks have always been here, and we always will be. I mean, one thing I always just think, like, we just know a lot more about each other now, given the social media of it all and the 24-hour news cycle of it all.
Even in my own family, like I was one of the first to come out. It was my older sister first and then me. But my older sister is my stepsister, so she had a little bit of a different, she's different grandparents. Mm-hmm. So when I came out, my grandmother was like, we don't have any other in the family other than Alicia. And I was like, Grandma, you have nieces and nephews that have miraculously never been married. Like, you don't think there's queerness in our own family? Really? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people in these smaller communities, and maybe in the broader community too, but I'll speak to what I know, is they see queerness and they refuse to acknowledge it, right? So anytime they're experiencing it, be it in media or meeting somebody, they're like, wow, this is so new. But they've been interacting with queer people their whole lives. In fact, some of them may even be queer themselves and have never done any of the exploration to know that. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I'm very
Oh, you'd be surprised.
Getting more into mental health, what kind of changes do you think need to happen to make mental health care, treatment, even just the conversation more inclusive and accessible to the LGBTQ community?
God, that's a good point. I think for mental health providers in particular, because so much care is done verbally and vocally, right? Building that relationship, having a knowledge base and competency about queer identities and queer people is going to be so important, because like when you first come out and you discover the community, you are hypersensitive to whether somebody is accepting and affirming or not. And that person might not even be aware that what they're saying, the language they're using, is exclusionary, right? So not being considerate of people's pronouns, not knowing some of the challenges faced by the queer community, both locally and on a national stage, not being aware of there being like differences between non-binary and transness. Like really, I think mental health care providers, and I think continuing education credits could do this and stuff, but like they just need to know how to code switch to talk to queer people, because we're as queer people, we have a certain language, right? And different mannerisms and things that show etiquette in our culture and queer culture, that I think if mental health care providers want to be open to this community, they need to learn to code switch to communicate with people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like, as an observation, people are also very unwilling to learn. So if they are using exclusionary language, they give up, or they get mad, or they take offense to being corrected.
Yeah.
And like, you're being corrected, but it's not, it's just, you have to learn. You have to grow as a professional, as a person. You have to continue to grow. So being upset about being corrected over like a pronoun or something like that, especially in the mental health field, you have to continue to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't necessarily always think that comes from like an ill-intentioned place either. I mean,
no one likes to be corrected.
no one likes to be
corrected.
corrected. And I do think also that sometimes people in and outside of the mental health sphere will kind of shy away from conversations about language around the queer community, or this sort of etiquette points that Savannah was mentioning, because they don't want to get it wrong.
Right. And so by completely ignoring it, that's another sign to queer people who are looking for acceptance that, I'm not going to do that for you. You know what I mean?
Right. It's a problem in the mental health field. For sure. So I agree with you, Savannah, that just kind of like an increased emphasis on queer competence and code switching would be a great first step. I mean, I, as a person who identify with like maybe a slightly lesser known like queer identity label, and don't get me wrong, I've had wonderful therapeutic experiences. Going to therapy has both saved and changed my life. But I did have an experience once where a former therapist was the first person that I ever came out to. And she did not know and did not acknowledge the validity of the label that I was using. And kind of like scoffed, brushed it off because it wasn't something she was familiar with, and didn't appear to be terribly willing to learn anything about it. And that the experience of coming out and not being believed or validated it put me off coming out to anybody else for a while. And I know that type of experience is not unique. So just like specific competence in helping, queer patients.
To build off of that too, if somebody is telling you their identity or telling you their pronouns or telling you their chosen name, and if they are correcting you, this is not a sign that they think that you are stupid or unworthy or anything. It's actually quite the opposite. They care enough to include you into something incredibly personal. And this goes more for corrections. If somebody is correcting you, that is a sign that they care enough about your relationship to want you to respect their identity. I have so many conversations with students who are like, yeah, I just spend all day getting misgendered by my teachers, and I'm so afraid to tell them otherwise because I know I'm going to offend them, and then they're going to make it my whole personality. And I just tell them, tell your teacher, I care about our relation, or the adult in your life, whoever, I care about our relationship enough to correct you. I want you to know that I value you. That's what, when people are correcting you about their identities, that's what they're saying. They're saying, I'm trusting you enough that you will be able to take this, this constructive criticism and build on it so we can grow closer in our relationship. And for so many kids, when that's rejected, that's where the relationship rupture happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure for your situation, you know, when you came out to your therapist, that might have even discouraged you from going to therapy. I mean, you have that experience with a professional that probably was like, hey, you know, you don't understand. Nobody will, I'm sure.
Right. And like in no way did I think at the time, oh, like this is a bad person or even this is a bad therapist, because what it actually made me feel was like, oh, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, turns out I was wrong about that aspect of my identity that I've been sort of exploring. So, yeah, I think it's very easy to do damage unintentionally, even as I said, with good intentions. So, yeah, I think
it would be, I think maybe, and you can tell me if this is wrong, a better response from your therapist, if she was feeling unsure, would have just been to say, hey, I don't really know much about that. Why don't we learn together? And next time we get together, why don't we talk about that and explore that together?
Absolutely.
Sometimes people get so wrapped up in their own head and their own anxiety about not doing it correctly or not saying the right things that they just end up completely rejecting the person in front of them. And that can have really deleterious effects on mental health.
I mean, I always feel like making a good faith effort is more important than getting it right 100% of the time. Because I mean, even like as a queer person and a queer advocate, I don't know absolutely everything. I get things wrong all the time. But approaching these kinds of conversations with good faith is, I feel, the most important thing.
Yeah.
Same.
I feel like, I feel like a lot of people are just scared to ask.
Oh, yeah,
They're just
absolutely.
terrified to ask. But I feel like you asking, correct me if I'm wrong, asking proves that you care.
Yes.
So they're
Yeah.
going to be more willing to educate you on it.
Yeah.
Taking an interest is the first step. Like, I just want to say to the mental health care providers out there, like, I know what's being asked of you is a lot, and I know that there's a lot of changing terminology. The best thing you can do is just approach it with that attitude of humility and being willing to learn.
Absolutely.
Like, really, that's, and so many mental health care providers do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, asking is that first step.
And it can be something that feels so small and insignificant, like my current therapist just incorporating asking about pronouns into the intake process just is a clear and immediate sign that, you know, there's a level of competency here that maybe didn't exist in previous therapeutic situations that I'd been in. So just that small show of good faith and effort goes a really long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My I have like a couple of non-binary friends, and they said that they started with a new therapist, and even just seeing like preferred pronouns on the form, they immediately were like, I am okay being here.
Yeah.
They care enough to learn the correct pronoun. I am safe being here. I am safe telling this therapist everything that I need to tell them.
Absolutely.
It's just really important. The
Yeah.
safe space, even if you're not a part of the communities, a safe space created by a therapist is important. So it's especially important for marginalized communities.
Absolutely.
Yes. And like the number one tool of therapy is that therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
So anytime you can do something to encourage the growth of that relationship, you're going to get a better outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a follow-up question for Christina.
Yeah, sure.
So for your situation, you kind of explained that you didn't give up on therapy.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, if that were to happen to them, they would probably get discouraged and be like, you know, I don't want to go back. This person didn't understand me. What advice do you have for those individuals who maybe had a bad experience or want to try therapy, but end up having a bad experience on, you know, helping their mental health?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I would definitely want to remind people is that you're not married to your therapist. And sometimes you might go to a therapist and you might get something out of it, but it starts to feel like maybe this isn't the right person for me. Their approach is not lining up with what I need, or maybe it's maybe it's not lining up with what I need now. There is absolutely nothing wrong with finding somebody else. I have done that 2 times in all the years that I have been going to therapy, and the result of, and it's not to say that any of my previous therapists have been bad practitioners. They're not bad people. They just helped me up to a point, and then they were no longer what I needed. And unfortunately, it's not an exact science picking out a therapist. There is, building a relationship with a therapist, I should say. There is some degree of trial and error. So don't be afraid to move on to somebody else who might be able to to fulfill your needs better. And this is really challenging, especially because therapy is such a vulnerable thing to have to, like the most vulnerable thing that I ever do. But it's, if you can manage to try to advocate for yourself, I guess one of the things that has helped me to do that over my experience in therapy, like I'm currently with a therapist that I'm super happy with. And I guess like one of the things I did that was different this time is kind of just did a little more research on like what I was looking for out of therapy. Like previous therapeutic experiences, it felt like I wasn't really involved in like goal or objective setting. And it just felt like I was here and somebody else was leading the conversation with no deference paid to like what my objectives were. Whereas this time, there was very much, I was an active participant in the intake. I was an active participant in the goal setting. And exactly, right. And like consequently, it's been a lot more impactful than previous therapeutic experiences that I've had. So I guess I would just say it takes a while sometimes to get it right, and it's super frustrating. It's the same with like your medication. It's really, it can be really frustrating. There's an element of trial and error that is time consuming and can be frustrating, but when you get it right, it's worth all the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that you're like not allowed to break up with your therapist, but like the difference between a therapist and like a partner is that you could break up with them and then they could help you find a new one.
Right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
They're more than willing to help you get a new one.
Right.
So.
They get it. Like they're not going to fit, their style's not going to fit every person. I got really lucky with my therapist. So I started seeing her when I was like 12 after my biological dad went to jail, and my mom was like, "Oh my God, we got to get the kids in counseling." And I'm
glad that she
well,
she was proactive.
She had to go too. Like we all went, me and my mom, we went to therapy. And she's still in therapy, and obviously so am I. And my counselor, as I have grown and my identity has changed, has done the work to educate herself and meet me where I am. And I just really respected and admire that about my therapist, was that she was like, yeah, I have no idea about LGBTQ stuff, but I'm going to learn now. And she did.
You've had the same counselor since you were 12.
Yeah. And
that is wild.
I've gone like on and off throughout the years.
Right.
But she saved my life. She kept me safe in really dangerous situations and taught me how to be resilient and stand on my own 2 feet. And then when I came out, she was like, all right, we're doing this now. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
She just got on board.
Yeah.
She has been such a champion of me and like just really done everything to give me the most resilient and wonderful experience I could imagine.
That is so great.
So I'm really grateful.
Yeah.
I'm talking to the audience right now. If you don't have a therapist that is a champion for you, you have to go find one. Or
Yeah.
else the therapy is not going to be beneficial at all.
No.
Absolutely.
Advocate for yourself.
They're
Easier said
out
than
there.
done.
It is.
might take a few
It
tries, but that therapist for you is out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's lots out there.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So for both of you, a question is, what advice would you have to give to LGBTQ youth struggling with acceptance, whether that be from themselves, family, community, whatever that may be?
God, that's a good question.
It is.
A lot of the advice I give is you can accept who you are, and you can accept your situation. And sometimes it's okay for you to accept that, but if it's not safe for you to come out, it's okay to wait. Like, just because you know that you might belong to the LGBTQ plus community doesn't mean you immediately have to come out if it's going to compromise your safety. Right. I have these conversations often with young people about, okay, if you come out, what is this going to look like, right? Because so many young people are financially dependent on their families or physically dependent on them. And sometimes coming out has to wait until you are physically safe enough to do it. And that is such a painful conversation to have with young people. And so I try to find ways and tell them different ways, like different places they can go to express who they are, like Compton's Table.
Right.
Where their identity is valid, and you can know your identity and be valid in it without compromising your safety if it comes down to it. And then for those who are in situations where they can come out and be who they are unrepentantly and they'll be supported, do that. Don't let people discourage you. Don't let the social pressure discourage you, because living authentically feels like breathing oxygen for the first time, or seeing in color, or tasting, sugar, right? It's so awesome. And the lens through which you live your life changes, but you have to wait sometimes until you are safe enough to get to have that. But you can give it to yourself internally, right? You can live in the knowledge of your own authenticity.
When I think about young queer folks who are struggling with their identities, I come back to something that feels totally like a platitude cliche, but I find it helpful. It really does get better. Like
it does.
It
really does.
We are living proof of that.
Yeah.
And being like a young person, a teenager, a child, a teenager, someone at that stage of life, it's already such a tumultuous time. You could speak to that, Savannah. Your students are there.
Every day.
My students are there to some extent, a little bit less, but it's already such a challenging, tumultuous time with so much anxiety and so much stress, and then adding into that uncertainty or shame about your sexual orientation, your gender identity. It's hard, but it's not going to be this hard forever.
No, that's so true, though. It really does get better. Yeah. Another thing I would tell young people is find your people.
Yes.
Find the people who accept you authentically for who you are and stick with them. Yeah. Cling to them. And then eventually you will become one of the people that accept those who are, coming out in their burgeoning identity, right? And that is as a queer person, like, that is such a sacred duty.
Yes.
To get the baton handed off to you, like, okay, you're the safe person now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that we as queer people have been raised by all of the older queers who kind of came before us and busted down those barriers and created spaces that we could be safe in. Yeah. And it's our duty to pay that forward from a place of like service leadership.
Absolutely. That's why I wanted to be involved with Compton's Table, because growing up not like acknowledging or understanding my own queer identity. Like I didn't have a queer community. And so now that I'm an adult and I want to build that community.
Me too. I very much believe in, especially like rural spaces, because that's where I grew up and it's where I teach at. There is a place for queer people. They exist out there. They'll always exist out there. How do we build it? And I love being a part of Compton's Table because that is the building of that community that I think so many people who are part of that like cis het world, they get to experience that right away, right? Be it church or Boy Scouts or whatever civic organization they're joined in. And I think we just continue the work of building what we can to help people that are like us.
Absolutely. So you've got to stick around long enough to find your people and your community.
Find your people, find safety, and embrace who you are, and just know that you're valid. I don't care who's telling you that you're not valid. You are valid.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Are there ways for allies to get involved with Compton's Table?
Absolutely. More hands make light work.
Because I'm intrigued.
Oh, yay, yay. Okay.
Oh, my gosh. Well, one thing we would absolutely love
yes.
is as we started to describe our programming, and that is, as I said, just our recurring programming. We also have a number of projects in the works that are more one-offs or sort of like things that we'll do multiple times, but not every month. So, for example, we're planning a big fundraiser for October.
Mm-hmm. We're doing a masquerade
gala.
Oh, yeah. It's going to feature an auction with queer art.
Yes.
I love that.
It takes place at the Erie Art Museum, which is a beautiful space.
That's so fun.
We need to mark out.
You should
Yes.
come.
We have.
We would love for you to come.
Yes.
I'm there.
And the queer community, like, we love our allies. We need you.
Absolutely.
Like, we literally need you, or
Right.
we are so screwed.
I feel like, and this is coming from an ally. I mean, self-proclaimed. You don't get to like determine if you're an ally, but coming from an ally, I feel like people are nervous to show up to those events, spaces, etc., because it's not for them. Mm-hmm. So like I feel like there's a line, but if you're being told you're welcome somewhere, you're welcome
Absolutely.
somewhere.
Yeah, and also like you can be in a space and not center yourself in that space. Like for a lot of allies, I think, and I would say a lot of people in the cis het world, if you like live in that world, it's hard to go to a different world. Like the LGBTQ world is a little bit different. We have like different etiquette rules. But if you go in the same way that we embrace our own authenticity, I expect, at least in my end, that my allies will embrace their authenticity. Like, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to screw up. It's okay to say something that maybe didn't land right, as long as you're willing to be educated. And that goes to the queer community, too, to be gracious about that education, right? This is a two-way street. But we absolutely love our allies, and we need them, honestly, now more than ever.
And like not to center yourself in queer spaces, but to show up in support to queer spaces is what allyship should be. Yep. Not just speaking in like general terms, it's easy. We talk about like performative allyship, right? Mm-hmm. So that can refer to an organization that splashes rainbows across their merchandise in June, but actually doesn't take any sort of stand in support of LGBTQ plus workers
or actively
rights.
Donates
or actively
to politicians
or
to cut our rights.
Or maybe they eliminate their diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice initiatives the second they legally don't have to have them. Whatever. I'm not talking about any particular company right now, but so that's an example. Yeah. But that can also apply to individuals who might say, I'm an ally, but don't engage in any way with the LGBTQ plus community and don't support events and causes and don't show up to to campaign for our rights and all that. So all this to say, we welcome, and not only do we welcome our allies, we need our allies.
And
It's if there was ever a time in the LGBTQ plus community to trade in your privilege and to use that to elevate, queer voices and those who are marginalized, I think this might be it.
Yeah, and like I read this quote online, and I don't know who to attribute it to, but if you're an ally, you should be standing close enough to us to get hit by the stones that are being thrown at us. Absolutely. Like if you're not getting hit with crap, you're not standing close enough. Like a lot of times allyship, especially for cishet people, is done in spaces without queer people in it, right? So that means being respectful of somebody's pronouns. That's a form of allyship. Going with your trans femme friend into the bathroom because she's scared is allyship. Standing with queer people as they talk about their rights and protest for them, that is allyship. Showing up to mutual aid events where you can donate your time, your money, anything, that is allyship. Anything that takes and centers queer voices is a form of allyship. And there's room for everybody's work. If you're somebody who is hands-on and you want to get in there and volunteer, by God, we've got work for you. If you're somebody who posts online supportive content, because sometimes, and I know there's a lot of conversation around virtue signaling and that not being all allyship, but that is an important part of allyship to say, hey, I'm supportive of queer people. Hey, I'll use your right pronouns. Hey, I'll respect your marriage and relationship and view it as equally valid as every other relationship, right? There's so many ways that people can just show up and show support in rooms where there aren't queer people. And that is allyship.
Another important form of allyship is joining a committee with Compton's Table.
We love committee members. We operate on the maxim, more hands make light work.
Absolutely.
And this is heavy work. We need people to run committees. We need people to help plan events. Even if you're like, I don't have any of those skills. Well, we'll show you. We'll teach you. Like, it might be folding newsletters. It might be wrapping packages. It might be putting together book bags for queer youth back to school events. There's so many ways to get involved. Like, please reach out. And you can find Compton's Table again on our website, www.comptonstable.org. You can find us on Blue Sky. We moved away from Meta because of the way that queer people are being talked about and allowed to be talked about on there. We didn't want our community further targeted because we do work with primarily trans and queer youth and adults, and they are really under the target microscope right now. But there are so many ways to help, and we're literally just grateful for anything that is done to help support this community. So please, like, if you think in any way you might be interested, reach out to us. We would be thrilled to have you.
Yeah, and if you're feeling in any way helpless and discouraged and frustrated by all the things, in the political climate surrounding our community that you can't control, as I definitely am.
Same.
One of the only things that gives me comfort is taking those feelings and channeling them into service. So if you feel the same, we've got a place for you.
Yep. And also, like, I wanted to say another form of allyship is talking to the people close to you and like having those really hard conversations about, do you accept LGBTQ plus identities? Do you view them as valid? And that can be really painful, but that is such a powerful way to show up in allyship, to be like, hey, I love you, person in my life, and I want to know that you are an accepting person to people that are different than you.
Yeah,
because that's the change making.
Absolutely. I always think like one of the first things, if you're going to be an advocate or an ally or both in a meaningful way, getting comfortable with your own discomfort around these kinds of conversations is critical. And like that's an ongoing thing. It's not like, well, I've mastered it now.
No,
you just have to expect and accept that sometimes these conversations are going to be uncomfortable,
And
but
that-
they're necessary.
And that you might not even know all of the answers to the questions.
Absolutely.
But just to go from a place of everybody deserves to live with dignity, and stripping people of their rights or denying them their humanity denies them dignity.
Right.
That is a tool I've found really successful, especially in my allyship to trans people. Just, you don't have to experience something to validate another person's experience of it.
Right.
It's called empathy.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's called empathy,
Yeah.
and I wish, we could all experience that.
I wish we were all more empathetic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to kind of end things, what are some of the resources for individuals struggling with mental health challenges or their identity? I know Compton's Table being one of
Yeah.
them. What other resources do you guys suggest for individuals who might be watching?
Yeah. So there are a variety. So I will say, we in Erie are super lucky. We have become, because of the way Erie is, we are like a hub for queer people in the surrounding region. So we're actually a sanctuary city,
Yes.
which means that for LGBTQ plus people, there are certain protections in place. And which also means we have a lot of LGBTQ plus people living in
Yes.
Erie from surrounding regions and from the city itself. So not only is there Compton's Table, Dr. Tyler Titus and Dr. Shraddha Prabhu run the
Refuge
Refuge
Therapy.
And that is an affirming place for people to seek
Yep.
therapy.
Specifically queer competent therapy.
Yes. There is also Journey to a Trauma-Informed Life. That is another queer competent group of therapists and social workers.
We have Compton's Table has a close partnership with Central Outreach Wellness Center of
Yes.
Erie, which is kind of, the standard for queer competent care.
Medical care.
Medical care, more, maybe less on the mental health side, but the standard for queer competent medical care in Erie. And the great thing is like having all of these resources available. I wanted to mention Trans Family.
Yep, Trans Family, Trans Picnics.
Yes, Trans
So
Picnics.
Trans Family primarily focuses, just as the name says, for trans and non-binary people to find community and get connected with resources that might be needed. What are some other ones? Goodness. There's like so many. I'm like, Northwest PA Pride Alliance
Yes.
is another one. So that's a group, another nonprofit that organize the big Pride on the Bay and Pride event in town. That's another place that you can go to seek support.
Right. And there are countless others that I couldn't list off the top of my
I'm
head, but
trying to figure it out.
As Savannah, as you said before, one of the main things that we do on a day-to-day basis at Compton's Table is connecting folks with resources. So our website's a great place to start. You can drop us a message. It goes right to our info email at comptonstable.org. And not only do we have, sort of the hookup for a lot of local resources that folks can use in, the health, mental health, education spheres. There's also a great kind of archive of just informational resources for people who are maybe exploring their own identities or parents and friends of people who may have recently come out, or people who want to know more about language specifically related to things like gender identity and sexual orientation. So I'm truly not just pushing our website here. I just do think we have a ton of really useful information. And there are more resources than what we've just been able to list off the top of our heads.
Right.
And we would love to connect you with them.
Yes. There are a variety of social workers and people who are working from that space of queer competence here in Erie. Hopefully NAMI too.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Yes, we would love to.
Awesome.
My last question before I turn it over to Abby is, so we mentioned, how therapists, counselors, and things like that, how continuing their education, learning more about the community can help. Is there any resources out there that you know of, possibly, or trainings or anything like that they might be able to refer to if they're watching right now and wanting to do that but just don't know where to go? Or can they even reach out to you guys and you refer them?
I was going to say that's a great question. They absolutely can reach out to us. Our founder, Dr. Titus, has developed actually, or is in the process of developing, some training materials that speak to just that very thing. And in fact, they have presented versions of that training at, I believe, schools mostly before. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. We would love it if you'd reach out to us if you're interested in that sort of training and more information, because we can provide that.
Yep.
Awesome. I have one actually.
Yeah.
The nonprofit partnership at the Community Foundation offered a safe zone training, and I feel like that's a really incredible place to start.
Yeah.
It goes over like language, like basic allyship, how to be a better ally.
Yes.
I would definitely take it. Highly recommend.
Yeah,
And then you're like
absolutely.
Safe Zone certified. They give you a sticker so you can put it on like
Yes.
your
I saw
office.
that on the door, and I was like, heck yeah.
Yes.
It was really great. It was really, really great.
I took a version of that at work. It was great. I just figured, even though I'm not an ally, I'm in the community, I could still learn. It was great. And the Erie Community Foundation is wonderful. They've been a really good partner to us.
They're really great.
Yeah.
They offer all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely.
They do. They're
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I have one final question.
Sure.
Trying to bring some hope to everyone.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for the LGBTQIA plus community in Erie, especially regarding mental health advocacy and support?
So as the national stage and politics plays out as it is, we here at the local level are working, and this includes local politicians too, working very hard to keep Erie affirming and safe for queer individuals. And there's a variety of people doing that kind of work. So my hope is that we come through this with having built on a local level more interconnected communities of support for queer people, and that includes getting them hooked up with services that they might need, mental health services, physical health services. So essentially we can weather what's happening on a national stage by having incredible strength here at a local level. So the goal right now that we're all working towards as we build community and engage in mutual aid is to create this shining rainbow city for Erie, right? Is to create this idea that everybody belongs here and everybody deserves to live with dignity and be viewed as a human being. And so that's my hope and optimism. And like what keeps me going despite the news is building these spaces that allow people to be affirmed and healthy and live with dignity. So that's my hope. That's what I cling to up here.
Absolutely. I agree. I think my immediate goals are just building the systems that give us resiliency, because it's a really, really scary time to be queer on a national level. And it's really easy to look at the news and what's going on in the way, our queer siblings are being spoken about, and just feel nothing but anxiety and real crippling fear. But the thing that I just cling to is we are a resilient people.
Oh yeah.
And
queer people have lived just listening to our stories, people live through stuff and then come out the other side needing support, but also with the resiliency of having made it through.
I want us to show up for each other at this very challenging time in our history and come out the other side ready to move forward.
I want us to hold space for each other's pain and joy and happiness and sadness, and embrace the reality of living through a huge rollback of rights while moving forward and advocating for our community. The more that we can knit together on this local level, the safer we can keep
Absolutely.
people.
And I just keep saying to myself all the time and saying to the young people who come through the doors at Compton's Table, queer people have always been here and we always will be. And there is no amount of legislation, there is no politician, there is no political atmosphere that can change that.
Yep. Yeah. And it just goes back to that basic, like, you deserve to live with dignity.
Absolutely.
And we refuse at Compton's
Yeah.
to back down from that.
Yeah.
So that's the hope and the goal, is that
Absolutely.
we continue to advocate for the dignity of our fellow person.
Agreed.
Thank you both so
Period.
much
Thank
for being
you.
here and joining us. I know there's so much more. We had like a whole list of questions that we didn't get to, which is totally fine because I think everything we talked about today is definitely important to talk about. And we're so grateful that you both were willing to share your stories and experiences, because I know it's different for viewers just hearing those stories, what people have gone through, to be able to connect and see that hope out there. So we truly do appreciate it. Maybe we'll have you join us again and we can continue the
love it.
conversation.
We would love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Thank you guys for allowing us to speak about this and giving us a chance to talk about what Compton's Table does
Absolutely.
and what we might be able to offer to the queer community and the broader Erie community. We're just grateful to be here and happy for the chance to get to talk about a group of people, a community of people who are beautiful and resilient and strong and capable, and who have existed and who will always exist. So thank you guys very
Thank
much.
you so much.
See, this is great allyship, centering voices.
Exactly. No, we seriously can't thank you both enough.
Thank you.
Again, for our viewers, that is COMPTONS table.org, right?
Yep.
Okay,
ComptonsTable.org.
perfect. So if you guys want to check it out, definitely check out their website. And
Follow us on Blue Sky.
There you go.
We're there.
Yeah.
Join our email list.
Yeah, join our email list, our text chain.
We do. Yeah. Hey, is there any other platforms you guys want to? Because I know we always like to plug all our platforms. Are you guys on Facebook, Instagram?
We just have Blue Sky now
Okay.
in terms
Yep.
of socials, but our website for the 300th time is the best,
Is the best.
the most
Yes.
direct, the best way, and also you can join our mailing list, which is, the most direct and efficient way
Yep.
to get information about what we're up to.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well,
Thank you guys.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you guys for watching. Happy Pride Month.
Happy
'Cause
Happy
it's
Pride
It will
Month.
be June when this goes up. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Stigma Stompers Podcast. We truly appreciate all your support.
If you want to see more about what we do in our community, make sure you check out our website. It's namierie.org. Make sure you also click on our t-shirt store tab so you can buy a t-shirt. We get a portion of all the proceeds. And make sure you sign up for our newsletter. It has all of our programming and event updates.
Another way you can get involved is if you feel comfortable sharing your personal story. You can email us at info@namierie.org, or you can give us a call at 814-456-1773.
Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye.